Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and I am still a little traumatized by this episode of Game of Thrones. What are you doing to me, HBO? As always, this episode review is full of spoilers, so make sure you're caught up on the show before watching this video, and let's talk about Season 7, Episode 4, Spoils of War. What an episode. Obviously, that last scene makes the entire thing, and it's pretty much the main event that I want to talk about here. There's a lot to discuss there. As always, I am going to cover everything that happens before that, but let's be honest. The final battle is what has everyone talking, and probably will have everyone talking until the next episode. That cliffhanger, screw you, HBO. That was so good, but so stressful. Let's start at the beginning though. The episode opens with the Lannister army taking the gold from Highgarden to King's Landing, and we actually get some Bronn dialogue this time around. Bronn wants a castle. Jaime says once they win the war, he can have one, which is pretty much the same thing that Euron got from Cersei for the thing that he wants, except for I have a feeling that Jaime would be much more likely to keep his promise than Cersei would. And speaking of Cersei, at King's Landing, Tycho Nestoris, the Iron Bank representative, is complimenting Cersei on being ready to repay the crown's debts and hopes to keep the relationship between the bank and the Lannisters going. She talks about reestablishing control and the need to expand her military forces, even mentions the Golden Company, which is the company of sellswords in the Free Cities. This scene in particular did not feel very necessary in this episode. It seems like the show really wants to keep us up to date with Cersei's plans, which I think are pretty obvious at this point. However, in this particular case, with Randall Tarley telling Jaime later that the gold has made it past the gates of King's Landing, this whole thing seemed a little bit redundant. It's not a bad scene, it's just the least interesting part of the episode for me. At Winterfell, we see Baelish give Bran the dagger that was used in the assassination attempt in Season 1, if you remember. This thing keeps coming up this season. We saw Sam looking at a page with cat's paw on it in one of the books. That's the name of the dagger. Bran quickly passed it along to Arya later this episode, so I think it's pretty clear this will come into play later. At this point, though, it seems like Baelish is attempting to gain Bran's trust, which is clearly not going to happen because Bran knows way too much to trust Littlefinger. We also get a callback to one of my favorite speeches in this entire show back from Season 3. As soon as Baelish mentions chaos, Bran responds with "chaos is a ladder," which clearly seems to make Baelish uncomfortable. Just like everyone else, Bran is creeping on with his choice of words. Before this awkward conversation goes any further though, Mira comes in, says she doesn't want to leave Bran, but needs to be with her family when the White Walkers come. Bran is just the worst in this scene. I kind of want to shake him these days because Mira clearly wants to hear something other than "no, I don't need you anymore, thanks," after everything that happened and after everything she has been through with him. But Bran isn't really Bran anymore, and sadly she realizes that he died in that cave. Personally, I still don't really know how to feel about Bran as a character at this point. He seems to be this convenient plot device at the moment that the writers want to use to reveal useful information when they need to reveal it, but I think the idea behind this whole situation with the Three-Eyed Raven and Bran becoming the new Three-Eyed Raven makes sense and is interesting. However, the reasoning behind what he says and when is just so unclear, and there are a million things he could tell Sansa and now Arya that she's arrived at Winterfell, that the fact that he chooses to ignore all of them and just be super cryptic and creepy just has no reason, because if you remember, the Three-Eyed Raven wasn't that antisocial. I get that Bran is still struggling with figuring out what to do with all this knowledge and it's probably really overwhelming, but Come on, Bran, have a little bit humanity left because you are way past the Three-Eyed Raven's lack of social skills at the moment. Anyways, Arya finally arrives at Winterfell and is stopped by the guards, which immediately reminded me of that one scene in season 1 where after Arya overhears the conversation between Varys and Illyrio, I think it was Illyrio, in the dungeons, and she wants to go warn her father and tell him what she's heard, but is temporarily stopped by the guards. But clearly no guards can ever get in Arya's way, because as the two of them are arguing about who is going to tell Sansa about this situation, Arya just gets up and leaves and goes to the crypts, which is where Sansa eventually finds her. I have to say, out of the 3 Stark kid reunions we've seen so far on the show, this one seemed the weakest, which is surprising. At least it's the one that did the least for me, and I would have thought this would have been way more impactful. I'm always happy to see the Starks reunite, but something just wasn't there this time around. It is possible that this scene actually felt this way on purpose. All of these kids had to deal with some crazy stuff over the past few years, and they are in very different places emotionally and mentally. There's this little moment in this particular scene when Arya mentions her list, and Sansa just laughs at it, just like the Lannister soldiers did when she said she was going to kill the queen. So Arya is still misunderstood by her family. She gives this fake laugh in response, and it's clear that even though she's happy to be home, this is not the home she was hoping for. So maybe making this reunion feel a little bit colder and kind of bittersweet was the point, and the showmakers really wanted to let us know how broken this family is, which is really sad. I do have to say that the shot of these 3 Stark kids making their way around Winterfell is such a weird thing to see. We haven't seen these 3 characters on screen together since the very first episode of the show, which is insane. But don't worry, or do, because Littlefinger is watching over them as well, and we actually hear a raven croak as he looks down in that scene. Is this a coincidence, or is he actually writing to someone, which is never good? Or is someone writing back to him, which is probably even worse? Let me know if you noticed this. Am I the only one who saw this and heard this? Anyways, the last thing we see at Winterfell is Arya sparring with Brienne because she wants to train with the lady who defeated the Hound. This scene was really cool. We haven't seen Arya fight properly, and there's so much Syria Farrell in the way she fights in this scene. I loved it. Who taught you how to do that? No one. I see what you did there, Arya. Shout out to the House of Black and White. Sansa and Baelish are watching from upstairs, and this also kind of plays into the idea of how broken this family is. Sure, you can see this as just Sansa looking at her sister being home, but does Sansa actually feel more alone than ever now? She's happy to be free and at home, but she is fighting with Jon. Bran is a fucking weirdo. Arya has a kill list and wants to spend her time fighting. Probably not the family reunion she was hoping for, and the only person who actually wants to be around her and tries to give her some advice is Peter Baelish. This is not going to turn out well. At Dragonstone, Missandei is worried about there being no word from the Unsullied, and Dany tries to reassure her that Grey Worm will come back. I'm mentioning this part because I actually really appreciated this quick moment of comic relief, because Dany wants to know what happened and Missandei just says many things, and Dany obviously wants to know what these many things are. But girl talk is interrupted by Jon Snow, who wants to show Dany the dragon glass cave, but really he's leading her to the markings on the cave walls from the Children of the Forest, and specifically the White Walkers on those walls. Side note, I really just can't wait to see some White Walker action. It's been a while since we've had a really good White Walker scene, and Hardhome is still probably my favorite scene on the entire show, so I just can't wait for us to get there. Anyways, Jon wants them to fight together, of course, because they all have a common enemy in the Night King. Dany says she will fight for him and for the North when he bends the knee. She just won't let it go. Obviously, she doesn't really know him that well just yet, so this is kind of understandable. But from the perspective of the audience, this is just getting a little bit too silly. Jon Snow, as we all know, doesn't even want to be the king in the North. He is a very reluctant leader, and I would not be surprised if his plan is to defeat the Night King and then to leave the North to Sansa. And then when it comes to the Iron Throne, he clearly has no interest in being the king of the Seven Kingdoms, and he has no problem with Dany ascending the throne eventually once they defeat the enemy from the North. So her insistence on the knee bending is just ridiculous here. This was also kind of funny because this is the second time she gets bad news when she's trying to make him bend the knee. Basically, she just needs to let it go. So Dany gets the news about Casterly Rock and Highgarden. Tyrion gets yelled at because his plans are causing her to be on the losing side of the war at the moment. And just like me in my last recap, she's questioning his loyalties and she's questioning whether the reason his plans suck is because the enemy is his family, which is something we're going to talk about in a few minutes. She asks Jon Snow for advice, and Jon gives a pretty good speech telling her that burning cities and castles isn't going to win her the love of the people, and she will just be more of what Westeros has seen before. Later, we get this odd scene between Ser Davos and Jon where Ser Davos implies that Jon has been staring at Dany's heart. This is for people who missed the cheesy long looks Dany and Jon were giving each other in this cave. But the best part of the scene is when we get a callback to Stannis with Jon saying, "How many men do we have to fight the Night King? 10,000? Less?" And Davos corrects him with fewer, which is a grammatical correction Stannis shared with us back in season 5 at Castle Black, if you remember. Then we get Missandei wanting to know what a bastard is, and this quickly gets into why people follow Daenerys. I'm not sure what the point of the scene was really, especially this late in the episode. Okay, I get it. This could have been a way to show Jon how people follow Daenerys because they believe in her and because they trust her and because they love her. And this would have made sense earlier in the episode, but because this scene comes after Jon already gave a speech about how people follow Daenerys because she's different and she should continue being different, this part seems a little bit redundant because it's just reiterating what we already know and seemingly what Jon already knows. So not sure what the point was. But hey, a Greyjoy ship arrives and the Jon and Theon reunion is far from warm, of course, since Theon betrayed Robb back in the day. The fact that he saved Sansa is the only reason Jon doesn't kill him on the spot. Theon, of course, came to tell Daenerys that Euron has Yara and to ask her to help him get her back. But the Mother of Dragons isn't home right now. Where is she? Well, let's get into the best part of the episode. We get back to Jaime and Bronn, which is where we started the episode, but now they have made progress and are getting the last of their men to King's Landing, with the gold already being passed the gates, according to Randall Tarley. But then Bronn hears something, which of course is the Dothraki army led by Daenerys riding Drogon, who starts setting the Lannister men on fire. This scene was so well done and I loved it, but I was also incredibly stressed by everything that was going on. Obviously, we're down to the lead characters who we have followed for years now, and I didn't want anyone to die. I kind of just want everybody to be friends at this point. So this was intense, to say the least. There were some really epic shots throughout the entire thing. I'm even willing to overlook the fact that the horses would probably be afraid of fire and wouldn't just come through it that easily, but seeing the Dothraki come out of the dragon fire looked great. Also, that shot of Drogon breathing fire on the army was just insane. And if you watch the HBO special on how they filmed this whole scene, it's freaking impressive how much of this was actually done with practical effects and what went into it. And this is probably why it looked so good. Then there was the long take of Bronn stumbling through this mess on the way to the Scorpion with everything around him on fire, and Drogon is flying overhead and the Dothraki rider is chasing him. But thankfully he somehow makes it through and he gets the weapon ready to take down Smaug. I mean Drogon, but come on. Who did not think about the Hobbit movies watching that? I also thought it was clever that they had the shot of him losing his gold, and there are so many scenes in films and books where a character meets his end because his greed gets the best of him. You could easily see this scene going the typical way of him running to pick up his gold, which he did consider for a second, you can tell, and then one of the Dothraki riders just taking his head off as he's distracted. But Game of Thrones is better than that trope, which means Bronn as a person is better than that trope, which makes him a better and more interesting character. He does end up hitting Drogon under the wing, which is obviously not enough to kill him, but enough to take him down. And of course, this is where we get Jaime charging at Daenerys while she's trying to help Drogon. He almost gets roasted, but Bronn knocks him out of the way into the river, where he is quickly sinking now, weighed down by his armor. That cliffhanger is just cruel, HBO. Okay, let's talk about this. Realistically, Jaime is probably 99% sure not going to die because he still has his Valonqar prophecy of killing Cersei to fulfill, which is a theory a lot of us are fans of, but just in general, I don't think they would cliffhanger his death. I think if he were to die in one of the episodes, they would show it in a definite way and they would not leave people hanging for a week or however long it's going to take to reveal his fate, just to be like, oh yeah, he died last time. Like that, I don't think they would do that. There are, of course, the logistics of him getting out of the water. He's not a small guy to begin with, and then this entire set of armor is very much weighing him down. So there's no way he's going to swim out by himself. That would seem pretty impossible. But hopefully Bronn is going to be there to help him out once again. What would he ever do without Bronn? I do have to say though, the scene of him charging at Daenerys made me realize how much I love show Jaime. Book Jaime is easily a favorite of mine. I think I mentioned it a few times before, and I thought that show Jaime was much lower on my list of favorite characters just because his character arc is so different and I much prefer his character arc in the books. But as he was charging, I had a split-second moment where I realized that if one of these characters had to die right now, it better not be Jaime, because I am so not ready to let Jaime go, even in the show. So I guess he's much higher on my priority list than I thought, because I would give up Dany for Jaime Lannister. Wow. Also, let's talk about Tyrion for a minute. Remember last week in my recap, I was talking about how Tyrion is giving me these strange Lannister loyalty vibes and how I don't know if his allegiance is 100% with Daenerys and how I think his family name is going to come into play at some point. Well, this episode made my feelings about this a lot stronger. The showmakers clearly made a point of showing part of this wreckage through his eyes, and looking at his family army getting demolished as his brother is on the opposite side of this fight is going to take a toll on him, potentially enough to break his allegiance to Daenerys. And as book readers will remember, one of the prophecies that Daenerys receives in the House of the Undying at Qarth, if you remember, that was back in season 2, I believe, is that she is going to have 3 major betrayals. And if my calculations are correct, she's only had 2, so she's due for another. Let's take this hypothetical scenario as an example, which is something my friend and I were speculating about after the episode. Tyrion obviously cares about Jaime a lot. We can see that in this episode as he wants Jaime to get the hell away from that dragon. What if Jaime gets captured? What if Daenerys' soldiers fish him out of the river and he becomes a prisoner? Obviously, Dany is not going to be very kind to him. So I could easily see Tyrion releasing him and going against Daenerys and returning the favor Jaime did him in season 4 when he released him when he was about to be executed at King's Landing. And I have to say, watching these two brothers on the opposite sides of the conflict was so sad and heartbreaking. It's just another reason why this whole last scene worked so well. So I could easily see the showmakers taking this further and going for a legitimate reunion between the two. Also, fuck that Dothraki guy who told Tyrion, your people can't fight. Why don't you go fight a dragon, buddy? We'll see how you do against Dragonfire. Anyways, I think I'm going to stop here because this video is already getting way too long and I could discuss this episode and particularly this last scene for much longer. Just talk to me in the comments about it. I really liked episode 3, but episode 4 definitely topped it for me, and I'm so happy to see how well this season is ramping up. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with the next episode. So that's it for this recap and review. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, let's discuss all of this in the comments below. I would love to talk to you and know what your thoughts and theories are. Don't post any confirmed production spoilers. I would like to stay away from that, but theorizing based on what has happened so far and maybe some information from the books is totally fine. Let's discuss. Thank you so much for watching as always. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!